Objectification. The act of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. As a woman, you're probably all too familiar with this subject. Throughout history, the objectification of women has gone hand in hand with gender discrimination, body dysmorphia, and sexual violence. But what of male objectification? Since my audience is mainly women, I've focused mainly on beauty standards and objectification of women, but since I've gotten a couple of comments along the gist of what of men, I thought I'd cover the objectification of a certain beautiful boy, Bjorn Andresen. Early life. Bjorn, a Swedish actor and musician, was born in 1955 and is best known for playing the 14-year-old Tadzio in Luchino Visconti's famous 1971 film adaptation of the 1912 Thomas Mann novella Death in Venice. You may also know him for his minor role in Midsummer. I had read about Bjorn's later life and his struggle with objectification following Death in Venice, but I never anticipated his difficult start to life. Bjorn revealed in the 2021 documentary, The Most Beautiful Boy in the World, that his father has never been identified, and his bohemian mother, Barbara Elizabeth, made it no secret she wanted more from life than being a mother to Bjorn and his half-sister. Bjorn recalled standing behind her as she stared silently out of a window and thinking, "When I grow up, I'm going to save Mum." But he would never get the chance. Barbara went missing in October of 1965, when he was only 10, only to be discovered in May next year in the woods, having already taken her own life. He was then brought up by his maternal grandparents in Stockholm and schooled at boarding school in Denmark. The family never mentioned Barbara again. As a student, Andresen attended Adolf Fredrik's music school in Stockholm, never wanting to act, but instead hoping to be a pianist. But because of Bjorn's early life events, the lack of parents, Bjorn gained a stage grandma, fatally addicted to fame, who had other ideas. She wanted at least one of the children to be famous, pushing him into showbiz just as Visconti was searching for the role of boy ingenue for the silver screen. She was more than willing to indulge in her desires without considering the emotional damage it would wreak on her grandson. Before he auditioned for Death in Venice, Bjorn had only one other film role, a Swedish love story in 1970, for which he was paid $4,000. Death in Venice. In 1970, critically acclaimed filmmaker Luchino Visconti was set to direct his upcoming film, Death in Venice, which has since become a cult gay film, as director Visconti, its leading star, English actor Dirk Bogarde, Thomas Mann, the writer of the novella, and most of the crew were reportedly gay. Although the relationship with his older co-star wasn't tackled in his biographical documentary, Bjorn told the Mail in 2003 that Bogarde was always very courteous, very kind and very British. He was the only foreigner that bothered to learn the correct pronunciation of Bjorn's name and later instructed him on how to bow to the Queen when he met her. Visconti had a vision. He went to scour Europe for years to find his perfect beauty to play the lead. It couldn't be just anyone. The successful candidate would have the otherworldly beauty an audience could believe would be sufficient to drive an aging and ailing composer to distraction. But Visconti wasn't looking for a woman, but rather an adolescent boy. By today's standards, director Visconti's enthusiastic search for an alluring boy to arguably obsess over himself would be completely inappropriate. The writer of the novella describes Visconti's vision, the look he sought to capture, as having honey-coloured hair, eyes the colour of water, beauty like a Greek god, and his being as cold as a statue. Meanwhile, Bjorn's grandmother, who enjoyed all the trappings of fame, urged him to answer the casting call for Tadzio, later pushing him to make trips to Japan and European capitals after the film captured international audiences. Consequently, Visconti came to find what he was looking for, casting the 15-year-old Swede to play a sailor-suited Polish boy by the name of Tadzio. Similar to the film relationship between the fictional great writer and his muse, this dynamic seemingly played out in real life, with Bjorn and the openly gay director who was captivated by Andrésen's beauty. It began with a screen test. Footage documents Visconti sizing up lines of boys that filed past him during the Europe-wide quest for Tadzio. "How old is he?" "Older, right?" Visconti asked a Swedish-speaking casting director as Bjorn posed for them at the 1970 Stockholm casting call. "Yes, a little. He's 15, the casting director replied. 15, very beautiful, the director observed. The casting director remembers, "I was standing up next to Visconti when this blonde boy turned up. It was plain to see that Visconti's whole body came to life. The boy was exquisitely beautiful, with a truly photogenic face. He was a real find. He was a boy with a very special charisma. He seems frail, and that's really beautiful in a film." Visconti then asked the director, "Could you ask him to undress?" Shocked at the request, but being just 15, Bjorn giggled nervously but complied, stripping down to his underwear, walking around and looking into the camera. The photographer snapped away, and a delighted Visconti made it clear that this was the one. Visconti constantly talked up Bjorn's looks, coining him the most beautiful boy in the world, a moniker which caught on like wildfire, which the resulting attention, according to Bjorn, pretty much ruined his life. He often describes his discomfort with the role, stating that when he watches it now, he sees how that SOB, referring to director Visconti, sexualized him. By his own admission, Bjorn would have been much happier if he never met Visconti, whom he describes as a cultural predator who cynically exploited and objectified his looks and youth. With the film's release, Andresen became an overnight international superstar, the world's most fawned-over face, but this fame would have become a living nightmare, which would scar him for life. Much to his discomfort, Andresen became a sex symbol, and for some, a gay icon. Rumors started circulating in the US that Bjorn was gay, as the role demanded he be kissed by another boy and also exchange romantic glances with the protagonist. Rumors were further fueled when Visconti also pressured Bjorn to attend a gay club, which he later described the experience of being stared at by adult men as hell. Eager to dispel these rumors and shed his pretty boy image, Bjorn avoided homosexual roles and parts which heavily emphasized his looks. Despite Visconti proclaiming in front of Queen Elizabeth and Princess Anne at the film's world premiere in London that Bjorn was the world's most beautiful boy, a stunning accolade echoed by critics who hailed Bjorn to be an almost unearthly beauty, as if on par with Michelangelo's David, Visconti's tune changed when he toured to promote the film. At 16, Visconti was already making disparaging and gross jokes about how Bjorn was less beautiful now that he was a year older and taller. Visconti's objectification of Bjorn does spotlight an interesting perspective of when objectified men or women find it difficult to hold on to self-worth when it is tangled up in fleeting beauty. The role of Tadzio catapulted him to celebrity status, but as his fame rose, his happiness fell. He received sackfuls of fan mail from both besotted teenagers and grown men. Parades of men treated Bjorn like a piece of meat, or as he put it, a big game to be won. His international recognition led to a whirlwind international tour, becoming a hit singer in Japan. Bjorn was given pills to keep up with the hot and fast pace of his popularity. Andresen went on to spend an extended period of time in Japan, appearing in TV commercials and recording several pop songs. His arrival in Tokyo was described as being similar to the Beatles' landing in the US. He was met with mass hysteria and received an enormous amount of female attention. Manga artists in particular were struck by his androgynous prettiness. In the 1970s, a new generation of manga artists, a group collectively referred to as Year 24 Group, targeting shoujo, a young female demographic, emerged during the decade. The Year 24 Group did much to inscribe Bjorn's presence in the medium of manga. These female artists took control of the masculine image, giving bishonen or beautiful boys a new incarnation in the 70s, creating characters which embodied an androgynous beauty. Andresen's appearance, vampiric and princely in nature, was noted as being particularly influential on these artworks, providing his cultural DNA to the shoujo manga industry. He had a marked influence on the portrayal of ambiguous male heroes, inspiring depictions of beautiful boys as youthful heroes doomed to fall like blossoms. Notable examples include Gilbert Cocteau, Lady Oscar in The Rose of Versailles, Julius in The Window of Orpheus, and a depiction by Ryoko Ikeda. There are also plenty of other examples which seem to be either directly inspired or influenced by Andresen indirectly. Beautiful boys in manga are typically drawn delicately with long limbs, silky or flowing hair, feminine and slender eyes with long eyelashes. Whilst beautiful boys have an amalgamation of influences, it's safe to say that any blonde, curly-haired bishonen was likely influenced by Death in Venice. In 1976, at the age of 21, Bjorn went to Paris for a film. The project never came to fruition, but he stayed a year despite being penniless. Bjorn received money and gifts from men he thought were friends or generous fans. Looking back, he realizes that he was just an escort trophy for a string of rich Parisian men who lavished him with gifts, meals, set him up in a nice apartment, and gave him 500 francs weekly pocket money. He said, "I must have been naive, because it was sort of like, wow, everyone's so nice." Despite the rumours and fleeting confusion in his 20s regarding his sexuality, Bjorn insists that homosexuality is not really his cup of tea and that he's always preferred women. In 1983, he married a poet, Susanna Roman, who he had a daughter with in 1984. Tragedy struck again 3 years later when the couple's 9-month-old son died of sudden infant death syndrome. After a night of drinking, Bjorn was lying beside him in his bed as his wife took their daughter to kindergarten. Despite being caught deaf, Bjorn blamed himself for the tragedy, saying he'd been an inadequate father. Andresen fell into a long depression, alcoholism, and self-destruction following the death of his son, and soon his family collapsed. He said in a 2020 interview that he believes he will meet his son again in the afterlife. Terming Bjorn the most beautiful boy may have arguably been a marketing stunt by Visconti, but the remark became a millstone around Andresen's neck for decades. Despite sparking an intense spurt of global fame, this was short-lived. Andresen's acting career proved relatively unsuccessful, with him repeatedly breaking off from it to work as a music teacher. He later disappeared from public view only to re-emerge in 2003 as his boyhood photo was used to illustrate the front cover of The Beautiful Boy by Germaine Greer. Her book of erotica and history, an ode to the beauty of young boys. Bjorn publicly complained that he never would have consented, as an exposition to adult lust for adolescents was nothing to celebrate. He was infuriated by the irony that one of the contemporary era's best-known feminists was using his image as an object of desire when the feminist movement was constructed to critique the notion of objectification. Once again, he found the feeling of being used distasteful. Nowadays, Andresen is still striking, but more like a rake-thin wizard. He remains a troubled soul, Still suffering from depression, he is often tearful, living alone in a squalid flat, chain-smoking, bickering with his on-off girlfriend, and, as shown in his documentary, facing eviction from his apartment for filth and carelessness of leaving gas burners on. Bjorn has since appeared in several other films and is a professional musician. Despite likening himself in a 2003 Guardian interview as an exotic animal in a cage, his story is one of reconciliation and resilience. Despite the objectification and living proof that beauty can be a curse, taking shape as a boy whose childhood was stolen by a highly manipulative film director, Bjorn optimistically anticipates his ongoing work as a musician and is renewing significant relationships in his life, including his girlfriend and daughter.